Welcome back, everyone. In this part, we're going to try and track down a DNA sequencer, but first, we're going to go ahead and jump into the security office for a little bit. This room is going to play a key part in a couple of puzzles later on, namely to deal with this motion detector, which currently isn't working. But for now, let's check out this security guard.
They cut his wrists.
Everyone say hello to Paul, he works in security, as does a person named Ronald who wasn't equipped to be in security, but he was assigned there anyway. So what happens is the security guidelines change, they have to lock a few more doors, and they don't really think much of it, but eventually food supplies start to come in short supply, so people start distilling alcohol, which is technically against the rules, but they allow it anyway. Paul wants to do something about the people who are brewing alcohol, but nobody else does, so he's just a sitting duck now. Meanwhile, the back end of the Groom Lake just starts exploding and no one knows why. It causes a bunch of people to get injured, but no one can go to medical because the Groom Lake is on lockdown and Station B has been completely trashed. In the meantime, Ronald killed himself as an alternative to going outside and getting killed by whatever's been lurking around the ship. Things go completely silent for an entire day, and even another guy that he works with named Ivan is just flat out not responding, because he started drinking nothing but moonshine instead of water, and so he's dead now too. And then eventually Paul just offed himself. This is another thing I like about this game, is it goes a little bit of the extra mile to build up some rivalries or friendships among people on the Groom Lake. Well, you can look into this adjacent room to see the life support control. We are going to have to get there eventually, which means we'll have to figure out a way to get through the motion detector. But for now, there's a second dead officer here, and this one happens to be Ivan. We learn from his PDA entries that, unlike Paul, he actually likes Anderson, and he thinks Paul is kind of a prick. This despite the fact that Anderson doesn't seem to know a lot about what's going on, and he keeps confusing things, like this guy's last name. He makes some remarks about quote-unquote moderating the supply of moonshine that's being made on the Groom Lake, and how it goes on lockdown, and how eventually rations do come in, but they have to be split up among everybody. And then he mentions that there was a group of people that went to try and fix the tram and haven't been heard from since. As things get more dire, he hints that he and Paul have something of a suicide pact. He doesn't directly say it, but he says they have a solution for when things go really, really bad. Anderson finds out about this and apparently doesn't like the idea, so he does something else, which I can only assume that he left the room during lockdown and got killed. And that really gets to Ivan because he liked Anderson. Then we find out that Anderson was talking about Samantha. There's that thing again. And as a final note, he wonders if anyone is ever going to read these PDA entries. If this ship is just going to drift like a lifeless husk to the edge of space and nobody's ever going to realize that these people existed. So he begs for whoever reads this to remember Anderson specifically. Now back to more important matters. There are some security cameras on this console. You don't have to look at these, but you can, because it gives an idea of what we're going to see later on. Or not see in the case of that one in the lower left. All three of the areas you can see right now are places we are eventually going to go. Although we have to do something about the top right area because it's flooded with a highly toxic gas. That in particular is a reason that we need to get past the motion sensor and into the life control area to operate the console. For now though, here's even more stuff to read. And I'm just going to summarize this for you. Security knew quite well that there were people on the Groom Lake making their own alcohol, and they allowed it to happen and only kinda sorta policed it, because they thought it would quote-unquote boost morale, and prevent people from doing more drastic things like stealing shit from other people. And rations came in, and they were equally distributed, so I guess they were right about that. There's also another mention of Samantha, who is now contained in an iron lung and is ready for transport to the labs. But she didn't quite get there. And we also find out that those 4 people who went to fix the tram, because they didn't come back, that's the reason that the area they went through is flooded with that highly corrosive gas that we saw in the top right monitor of that security camera footage. Anyway, let's try to get to atmosphere control.
I'll need to figure something out here.
You most certainly will, John, because if you just try running up to the door and opening it the old-fashioned way, this happens.
Just
Ladies and
fucking
gentlemen,
open!
a moment of silence to remember Henry.
It kind of got cut off, but there was a voiceover saying that they were holding a moment of silence for a worker. So, even when they were still sort of in control of this area, things were still going to shit.
Once we know where Becca is, how can I get to her?
There is another tram through the crew quarters. Once we know where you're going, we'll move forward from there.
More trams.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, John. Now just take in that graffiti on the wall.
God forgive us.
And far be it for me to spoil things about this game, but jump scare!
There's another door here. I don't see an access panel.
It must be the secondary containment. Give me some time, and I'll see what I can do.
Didn't think that would work.
Well then why did you do— Oh, right, I clicked on it.
I wish I could do something. Something more.
Well, this guy seems to have an idea for you. This is Dr. Rick Graham, and he's kind of a nut job. He usually patches people up because he's a doctor, just doing basic medical stuff. But then security screws up and sends him Samantha. So he spends a bunch of time observing Samantha and her habits and her growth, and has his assistant make up excuses for why he's not transferring it directly to the lab it's supposed to go to. When Samantha arrives at his lab, she has a fully formed spine, which wasn't there before. And while he's observing Samantha, as time goes by, she grows eyes. People start getting suspicious, and he knows that his assistant Miriam wants his job, and would otherwise turn him in, but he has video of her screwing other people from the lab, so she's kinda under his thumb. He plans to take full credit for Samantha, but then the tremors start happening, he gets injured, and he has to start treating people without full access to the medical wing. Eventually, he just says somebody else can take responsibility for Samantha, and as it goes on lockdown, he starts hearing screams from the entertainment section of the ship, which he likens to when he did surgery on a patient and they woke up, looked down, and saw their open ribs. And as this is going on, he also notes that he hasn't seen his assistant Miriam in a while. Now we're going to go into the medical laboratory, and something kind of contradictory is going to happen here, because we're going to find Miriam's PDA. And yes, I know, it's another PDA, it's the last one in this video. This is also your opportunity to say hello to Samantha. That's her iron lung. In the middle of the room. We're going to be walking directly around it a few times. But anyway, Miriam's PDA. Unlike Dr. Graham, she is repulsed by Samantha and doesn't want anything to do with it. And she is contemplating finding a way to turn in Dr. Graham so that she can take his position on the Groom Lake. Meanwhile, Samantha doesn't even resemble a tail anymore because she's been growing body parts at a steady rate. And eventually Miriam gets locked out of the medical bay. Then how did her PDA get here? Anyway, she's locked out, and Dr. Graham has locked himself in with Samantha while people are needing medical treatment for all the tremors and power outages and accidents happening on the Groom Lake. Some people start suggesting maybe using the track used to transport specimens to try and get to the medical wing, but she notes how bad an idea that is. And then she wraps it up by noting, why are people typing on their PDAs? No one's going to read this, and whatever planet the ship crash lands on, no one's going to care about their feelings. And with all that being said, I think it's about time we have a bit of a face-to-face with Samantha, but we're going to have to use the portal on the side of the Iron Lung to do that.
I'm not sure what this Holy fuck.
Now you can keep going back to looking through the portal, but the second time you look through it, this happens.
My imagination's playing tricks on me.
Samantha gets really shy, and after the second time you look through, nothing happens. So after a little bit of unnecessarily long pathfinding, let's head on over to the DNA scanner.
I think this is it.
Excellent. You need to get your blood sample onto the receiving tray, and I'll do the rest.
Now we're going to need a blood sample to get this working, so this is another puzzle where we're going to use the hypodermic syringe to extract some of John's blood. And then instead of just like using the needle to squirt it out on the DNA sequencer, we're just going to take the entire syringe and just plop it on the scanner, and it'll scan that.
Okay, it's working.
Receiving the genetic info. This is good, John. This is excellent.
Wait. I can hear something.
Now what is the absolute last thing you think we should do? Well, there's a hand that appears when you hover over the frosted glass window now, so we have to do the thing that we absolutely shouldn't.
Sure. What the hell was that?
I only picked up a flash from the scanner. A crew member.
I wasn't a crew member. I wasn't even a person. It was an animal.
The upload finished. I'm going to start the scan now.
Tia, what's going on here?
I've heard things, but I don't know any specifics. You have to believe me.
Maybe it was one of those fucking things that ate Yuri.
I grow plants. I don't care for man's pets.
Just let me know when the scan's finished.
Secondary containment is now accessible. Head through to the other tram station.
Sure, I'll walk in the general direction of where I saw that thing that almost killed me. I see nothing wrong with this plan.
Warning. Serotonin levels are abnormal.
And on that encouraging note, next time on Stasis, if we're not careful, one of the things in this room will kill us.